All right, so welcome back. We're going to take a look at how you can actually make the game end now, which is probably the next best thing. Then we can add some sounds, maybe some particle effects, and maybe like a pause screen and a beginning game screen. So let's make the game end first, though. So how we're going to do that, there's a few different ways that we can do this. First, we could, like essentially what we want to do is we want whenever the bricks get past a certain point, so like let me zoom in here. So like right up here I've got these points laid out. Like this one is -2.8, -1.12. And then each of these are a unity unit. And so it's going down by 1 each time. I want the bricks to stop, or to not go any more than this far. And if they were to advance down another time, I want that to count that as a game over. So in this line right here, I'm just kind of drawing in, I want that to be the line that's as far as the bricks can go down. If they go down any further, then we're going to trigger a game over. So there's a few things I need to do for that. First, I need to have a game over state. So I'm going to go into my ball controller script here, where I have pretty much the game's states all set up. I have my aim state, which is when you're aiming the ball, fire state when the balls are bouncing around, the wait state while you're waiting for all of the extra balls to go away so that you're left with just the one, and then end shot, which is what triggers the bricks to move. I'm going to add another state up here, and before I do that, let me just embiggen this so you guys can see it better. Okay, so after end shot, I'm going to do comma, and I'll call this end game, and that's the next state. So I need to have just like some way to know that in the end game state everything is just ending. You can't do anything. So down here in my update method, when I have my switch statement, which is the current ball state, I've got aim, then it does this, fire, it does this, wait, it does this, end shot, it does this, and then I have my default state. So I'm going to create a new state here, and that is going to be case ball state dot end game, and colon for this because we're using a switch statement, and I'm just going to have it break, meaning it's just going to access this and not do anything. Okay, so now I have this end game state set up. The next thing I need to do, just make sure I save my script. Back in Unity, I'm going to create a UI panel which is going to overlay everything when the game ends. So let me do that here really quickly. So we're going to take a look at our canvas, and we're going to create a new object inside the canvas. So I'm going to right click this, and you can either do this as an image or as a panel. The only difference in how Unity sees those two things, images and panels, is their initial settings. But essentially, as far as Unity is concerned, they're the same. I'm going to choose a panel just because I want its initial settings to take up the entire screen, making it so that I can't really interact with anything. So when I create a panel, just like when I created the text, you can see our screen kind of already got dimmer. And you can see kind of up here, we've got this whole section blocked off. So I'm going to double click on the panel, which will automatically zoom me out so I can see it. Make this a little bit bigger. So this is, it's supposed to look like frosted glass. It's on top of everything. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some text to this, and then a button for retrying and a button for quitting. So I'm going to rename this object in the game scene just so I know what it is. I'm going to call this end game. Actually, I don't need to name it using camel case, so I'll just do end game panel. And now I want some objects that are going to be children of this object. So I'm going to right click, go down to UI, and go over to text. And this creates some new text here. I'm going to put this text, going to resize it so it's how I want it, put it towards the top of the scene. Right now it's anchored in the middle, which if I hit play would be fine. It would appear where it is. But if I maximize the screen, it would actually move down more towards the center because of the way the anchors are set up. So I'm going to set the anchor here to the top middle, And then I'm going to change this text to be game over, exclamation point. I'm going to make this box bigger, and then make sure it's centered. When you move this around, you can see how it kind of clicks to that blue line. That means it's centered. I'll leave it as Arial. I'll center justify it, and then I want to make this color actually black, because for some reason when Unity makes text it defaults to this kind of washed out gray color. The next thing I want to do is click best fit, which means that depending on how much space this has to take up, it's going to set the size of the font anywhere from 10 to 40, whichever one best fits this without overflowing. Okay. Next thing I'm going to do is in this end game panel again, so I'm going to highlight the end game panel. I'm going to right click, go to UI, I'm going to create a button, and I'll resize this for the screen, and I'll set this right in the center there. And I'm going to call this button retry. For some reason I'm having trouble remembering to use the right case. And I'll change the text on here to actually say retry. It's already center justified, and I'm going to make it black. And there's a lot of things you can do with buttons in Unity. If I go to this is the text I'm looking at here, change that to best fit. No, it's too big. If I go to retry, I can change the color it is when it's highlighted, color it is when it's pressed, color it is when it's disabled. Not really going to mess around with any of those. Now that I've got that button, I'm going to leave it center justified, just like it is right now, or not center justified, center anchored, just like it is right now. And I'm going to duplicate this button for our quit button. So I'm going to hit Control D on Windows or Command D on Mac to just duplicate it. And this one, drag down to here, and I'm going to anchor this one bottom center. And I'm going to rename this to quit button, and I'll redo the text to say quit. Now if I hit play, this panel is going to kind of overlay everything, which is going to make it so that I can't actually, oh, I thought it did, I guess it doesn't. We'll make it so that you can't actually interact with that. But we've got our two buttons here, retry and quit. They don't do anything yet. I was firing there. They don't do anything yet, but we can actually set them up so that they will do something. So let's do that right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this end game panel and I'm going to turn it off. And the way that you enable or disable an object, make sure I'm only disabling the panel itself, not anything else down here. Everything else down here needs to have this little tick mark next to its name. I'm only disabling the end game panel, the parent object. So even though these are all grayed out, if you highlight them, you can see that they're still supposed to be active, meaning when I set this active again, they'll come with it. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a trigger zone at the bottom of the screen that is going to put us into that endgame state, and then also bring the panel up. So to get back to where I am, I'm just going to double click on the ball and kind of scroll out. Now again, like I said, I want this right here, this line here, to be the lowest line that the bricks can reach to. So I'm going to create an empty game object. So I'm going to go to create empty, or you can right click and choose create empty. And we're going to call this end level trigger. As you can see, this object exists right there. You won't actually be able to see it there, but I can make it so that I can see it in the scene view. So to do that, I'm going to have my end level trigger highlighted. Up here next to its name and the tick mark, there's this little multicolored cube. If I click on that, I can have it have an icon. So I can have it be a circle, a diamond, or if I choose one of these, it'll have its name on it. So I'm going to choose gray just for, because it's like a game manager type thing. Put it right there, and I'm going to add a component to this. the component I'm going to add to it is a box collider 2D. Now, it's hard to see it with the background, so let me turn the background off really quickly. If I go to this end level trigger, you can see the boundary of the box collider 2D. I want this to go all the way over, and then down. So I'm going to go over to the box collider part of this, choose Edit Collider, and now I've got these handles I can grab on it. So I'm going to grab the handles and extend it that way, and this way, and down. And it's just beneath that line, meaning that the blocks will be able to reach here, but as soon as they go down here, they'll be inside the trigger. Turn off Edit Collider, and I want to turn this collider into a trigger. The difference between a trigger and a regular collider is triggers only listen for collisions and then do something. They don't actually collide with the thing. They don't have any physics to them, but they act as a trigger for something else to happen. Let me turn my background back on. Okay, so now I'm going to create a script that's going to listen for whenever the bricks come in, and when the bricks come in, it's going to trigger the end of the level. It's going to move the ball controller to that end game state. It's going to turn the panel on, and yeah, there we go. So it'll be the end of the game. So I'm going to go to my scripts here. I'm going to create a new C# script, and I'm going to call this End Game Manager. And then I'll open this up in MonoDevelop. So again, I need this script, let me biggen this a little bit. I need this script to know the ball controller, because I'm going to need to change the game state. So I'm going to first do that. So private ball controller, I'll just call it ball. Whenever I create a reference, I need to make sure I'm completing that reference either by making it public and completing it in the editor, or by completing it in the start method if it's private. So I'm going to say ball controller, sorry, wrong thing. Ball equals find object of type, ball controller. And there's only one of these in the scene, so we won't have any errors from that. The next thing I need to do is I need to know the endgame panel. So I'm going to do public, because I'm going to assign this in the editor, game object, and I'm going to call this end game panel. I don't need to complete this reference in the start method because I'm going to be completing it in the editor. Now, in here, outside the update, I'm going to add a new method, and this is a method that's baked into Unity. I'm going to call it void on trigger enter 2D, and we need the collider 2D, and I'm going to call that collider other. Now, I'm going to save this really quickly, pop back into Unity, and I want to make sure that I have my bricks with the right tag. Okay, cool. So now let's go to our prefabs, and our prefab for the square brick. So I have that as capital S square space capital B brick, and for the triangle brick, capital T triangle space capital B brick. So I'm going to go back in here. I'm going to say if other.gameObject.tag is equal to square brick. So if it's the square brick or if it's the triangle brick. So I'm going to use those bars again. They're located up above the return key. I'm going to hit shift, two of them, means or. Other.gameObject.tag is equal to capital T triangle, capital B brick. Okay. So we're going to be listening for for triggers, another collider entering the trigger zone. And if that collider is tagged as a square brick, or if that collider is tagged as a triangle brick, we're going to do something. Otherwise, we won't access this code at all. And what I want to do is I want to change the game state. So I'm going to do ball dot current state. Yeah, current ball state is equal to controller dot ball state dot endgame. which is going to change it so that it's not allowing me to aim anymore because it won't be in the aim state. It's going to jump right to the end game state. And in the end game state, all I'm doing is just breaking. So I'm just canceling out of the code every time. And the next thing I want to do is make the end game panel active. So end game panel set active true. So if you're using a game object, you can use a script that's active to turn game objects on and off. And that's what I'm doing here. So I've told it what the game object is, and then I'm using this script to find that game object and set it active. Now that means I want it inactive from the start. So in the start method, I'm going to do endGamePanel.setActive false. Now I already have it inactive in the editor, so I don't need this thing here, but just in case I accidentally turn it on before I hit play one time, I want to make sure that it's automatically turning it back off. Okay, so let's save our code and then pop back into Unity. So it's going to think for a second. And then choose our end level trigger, and I want to add that end game manager to it. It needs to know what the end game panel is. So I'm going to go over here to my canvas, grab the end game panel, and put it on. Now just to show you how this works, even if I turn on the end game panel right now, see how it's on down there? I'm going to hit maximize on play. It's going to turn it off as soon as I hit play. So now I'm going to try to do a bad job here. I might need to speed this up. Okay, so there we go. So the bricks went down where they're supposed to go. I've got this game over, retry, and quit. Now the buttons are super spaced out here. I'll show you how to fix that so it looks more like it's supposed to. But essentially, there we go. I can't interact with this anymore. I can't aim. But I don't have these buttons hooked up to do anything yet. And that's actually a super quick script. But before I do that, let's make sure that these buttons are going to look about the same as they did here. So to do that, I'm going to go to my endgame panel. I'm going to choose my retry button, and I'll double click on it so I can see it in the scene view. The problem that's happening here is because I just used the center, it's basing everything off that, but it's keeping itself roughly the same number of pixels. Now that number of pixels down here is looks like almost half the screen. That number of pixels when I go full screen is going to be almost nothing. Same thing with the quit button. It's going to be the same number of pixels across, but if I go full screen, it's different than it is here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change these anchors to actually fit the box. By doing that, by having the anchors fit the box itself, you are making it so that instead of being the same number of pixels every time, it's the same proportion of the screen space, which I find is a good way to make sure that things look the way they're supposed to. So if you're not seeing these anchors, so like if you click on this and you don't see those anchors down there, they're super, super tiny. But if you don't see them, make sure that you're on this box selection tool. If you're over here, you'll see them, but you won't be able to interact with them. Okay. So make sure that you're on the box selection tool so that you can interact with your anchors, have them take up as much screen space as you want. Okay, so once I do this, all right, and then this guy, I think I anchored at the bottom. Yep. Okay, so let's do that and that. And now let's wire up these buttons so that they can actually do something. So let's leave this in the end game manager. So let's go back to our end game manager. You could create a new script for this. You don't need to do this in here, but might as well do it in this end game manager. So what I need to do is I need to access something called scene management to either quit or to have it reload the scene. So up here in my using tags, I'm going to add another one. So using Unity engine.scene management. All right, I'm going to create two new methods down here. Now the first method is going to be retry, and I need to make sure they're public if they're being used by a button. So we'll do public void retry, and I'll create another method that I'm going to call quit. And again, if it's used by a button, it needs to be public. So public void quit. All right, so the retry method, I want to access the scene manager and reload the current scene. So I need to make sure that I have the name for the scene here. So if I go into my scenes, I called this capital M main. You need to make sure that you're keeping that spelling exactly correct. So in here in the retry, I'm going to do scene manager dot load scene, and the scene I want to load is capital M main. Okay, and now in the quit method, all I want to do is have this quit out of the program. And you won't be able to see this work in the editor. If you hit the quit button in the editor, it won't do anything. You'd have to actually create like a Windows or Mac or Android version in order for the quit button to work like it's supposed to. But we're going to call this application dot, no, not that, application dot quit. Okay, so now, if I hop back into Unity, I need to wire these buttons up to those features. So I'm going to wait for it to compile. I'm going to click on the retry button. Down here is the list of things it's going to do on click. I'm going to add a new one. It needs to know what object it's getting this from. I can either pull the end level trigger into here or click that and then choose the end level trigger. And then it needs to know what function it's getting from that game object. And the function it's going to get from it is from the end game manager. And this is the retry button, so I'm choosing the retry method. Now the quit button, I'm going to add to it. This time I'm going to pull the end level trigger in. End game manager, quit. All right, so now those buttons are all wired up. So I might need to fast forward through this again, but let me show you how it looks now. And there you go. So retry worked. Like I said, the quit button won't work in the editor because the editor isn't actually a standalone application, so it won't actually quit it. But if you were to make a build of this for Windows, Mac, or Android, or iOS, the quit button would quit out of the application like it's supposed to. Okay, so there we go. Next time we'll probably look at adding a score, and then we can also look at adding some sound effects and a beginning screen. Thank you very much. Have a great day.